Good morning, and thank you all for joining the call to provide you with updates on ISO's 2021 Summer Readiness activities. This is Christina Osborne with ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the meeting. We do have quite a bit of items on our agenda today. So first up, Oscar Hidalgo, Director of Communications and Public Relations, will provide an update on the communications protocols in place for this summer. Anna McKenna, VP of Market Policy and Performance, and Greg Cook, Executive Director of Market and Infrastructure Policy, will provide an update on policy enhancements that will be implemented by the summer. Jessica Tahiri, Energy Meteorologist, will present the summer outlook, weather outlook, Neil Miller, Vice President of Infrastructure and Operations Planning, will give a verbal update on the 2021 Summer Loads and Resources Assessment. And then finally, John Phipps, Executive Director of Grid Operations, will cover the Operations Readiness Update. Also listed as ISO panelists, you'll see Mark Rossletter, Abdul Muhammad Ali, Guillermo Bautista Alderete, and Amber Motley. So just a couple of reminders before I turn it over to our first speaker. I posted the presentation yesterday. It is available on the 2021 Summer Readiness webpage, which is linked on the homepage of ISO's website. We are recording the call. We do make that video file available to stakeholders for a limited time. It will be posted on that Summer Readiness webpage as well. As a reminder, please contact the ISO before reprinting any related transcriptions. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation, and I will go over instructions for how to raise your hand at that time. We will take questions both verbally and through the chat. So at this time, I will go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker, Oscar Hidalgo.
Thank you, Christina, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce you to a few new communications channels and continue to follow us on our existing channels. We have been active in news releases and will continue to highlight our summer readiness activities throughout the summer. We've conducted a media availability, and we're committed as well to continue to inform members of the media as things progress this summer. We've added some media resources. We've added B-roll, which can be used by media to view our control center and our building. And we're going to be posting video interviews in real time as events are warranted. Next slide. One of the new communications tools, the heat wave bulletin. We're going to try to give the public an advance warning of any grid challenges ahead of us. This is going to be in a news release format. It will be published at least or up to 7 days in advance of a forecasted heat wave. The idea here is it also will be a primer for those, especially for media, understanding how the grid operates, how reserves operate, and will kind of give a primer and give the public some advance warning of any issues that we have ahead of us. We're also launching, actually next week, an online blog. This will replace our monthly newsletter. This will be essentially an online newsletter that's more dynamic. We can get out information more quickly and be able to highlight educational materials that we have, as well as grid conditions. That will be, you'll see that on the main CAISO.com website once we launch, look like next week. Also, we launched this last year. The System Conditions Bulletin will be used during an event. This is a document that's posted online and updated in real time, depending on the nature of the grid event. The idea here is to keep many inquiries satisfied with information as we know it. That will be on our news page of the ISO website, and again, we will have easy to find directions on our website as we move into summer. I kind of mentioned the educational fact sheets that kind of go with the heat wave bulletin. These are, again, a series of educational fact sheets that cover everything from reserve requirements to how outages work. We've also updated our emergency fact sheet that aligns our energy emergency alert levels. There was some confusion last year that they don't necessarily, well, they don't align, and we wanted to make sure that we, we provide the information that reduces the amount of confusion about it. And next year, we are going to strictly the EEA level designations beginning next year. So this is a kind of a step towards that direction. Next. The Flex Alert campaign, the PUC earlier this year approved a $12 million annual advertising campaign. Last year we did not have an advertising campaign. So this is good to get consumer involvement. We also have a plan or way for consumers to communicate back to us their intentions on how they're going to participate in the conservation program, and by zip code. Over time, as we get the more consumers actively involved, we may be able to see some trends by area of conservation, and you'll see the pop-up there screen, the thank you for participating in the upcoming event. You'll see how what areas are really trending towards conservation, or at least their intent to conserve. Our flexalert.org site has been redesigned to include messaging to consumers on what to do prior to a Flex Alert. And that means everything from cooling down and using appliances prior to 4 p.m. And we're trying to get the consumer to be more comfortable if we need conservation, and to adjust their energy use rather than just simply shut down everything in the evening hours. And I mentioned the 4 p.m. We are now moving to a more standard 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. conservation timeline. This also aligns with other, it aligns with time of use rates, and the idea here is that it reduces confusion by the consumer on when to conserve. We're trying to standardize it. It does not mean we might not change that if the event needs, if the event warrants that. And so we, at least on the standard, this is the conservation times we're going to be seeking. We're also adding an API signal. It's basically that home automation manufacturers can plug into, and they can automatically be told when a Flex Alert is in effect, so that their consumers can participate somewhat automatically without much effort in that Flex Alert conservation program. So that's a very big step for us, and hopefully will add more conservation. Next slide. There's two additions to, I think, very good additions to today's Outlook, and all of this is intended, I mean, everything that we're talking about really is try to give you and the public as far as in advance warning as possible. We have two new charts that we're adding to the ISO. We expect it to launch early July. There's a resource adequacy capacity trend, and there's a 7-day forecast trend. And if you go to the next slide, I can kind of talk to them. So here you have a resource capacity trend, and a resource adequacy capacity trend, and you have 1 day showing 24 hours. We started here with the demand curve, and we added reserves. We added the gross load and net load into this single chart. This chart will be updated twice daily, and we'll have the ability to download the data from this chart going forward. So this, I think, will be helpful to understand the day's grid conditions more clearly, and allow those visitors to anticipate grid conditions. Next slide. This is the 7-day forecast trend. You'll see each column represents a day. You'll see that first column is today, and going forward 7 days, you can see the trend lines and anticipate any issues going forward. Again, it gives the viewer a look into the forecast to identify grid trends, and I think that's it for that slide. Thank you. I don't think there's any other slides on my end.
Nope, that's it. Thank you, Oscar.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions. I have some technical support as well for any of these charts if you want to ask any questions.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so what we'll do is we will take questions at the end of the presentation. So let's go ahead and ask Greg Cook to provide the policy update. So, Greg?
Thanks, Christina. We can go to the next slide. So a quick update here. We did file our summer readiness policy enhancements with FERC. We made 3 separate filings in March and April. The first one we made was on the summer readiness enhancements. We made a filing on March 26th, and that included the market enhancement that we were proposing for this summer, including the import bid price make-whole payment during tight supply conditions, pricing contingency reserves at the bid cap when we're at load shedding risk, and provisions to preserve our price signals when we're dispatching emergency DR resources. It also included some enhancements to the EIM resource sufficiency test, including where we would include an uncertainty amount in the EIM resource sufficiency test to ensure that there are sufficient bids to meet net load, including the net load uncertainty. So again, that was filed on March 26th. We're expecting an order to come out of FERC yesterday, and FERC delivered on that, and FERC approved all the provisions that we requested in that filing on March 26th. The next filing we made was for the resource adequacy enhancements phase 1. We filed that with FERC on March 29th, a couple days later. We're expecting a FERC order on that by the end of this week on Friday. And just as a reminder, that included the provisions for the minimum state of charge requirement for battery resources. Again, that would be an interim requirement to hold resource adequacy storage resources to their day-ahead market schedules during very tight supply conditions, and then also some enhancements to our planned outage substitution process, where we would require substitution for all planned outages. And again, we're expecting an order to come out on that at the end of this week. And then finally, the third filing was on our load exports and wheeling enhancements proposal. We made that filing at the end of April, on April 28th, and we're expecting a FERC order on that near the end of June, on June 27th. Next slide, please. So to give you an update on when we're planning on implementing these enhancements, first, for the resource adequacy enhancements, again, that includes the planned outage substitution enhancements. We're planning on putting that in place. Again, this is pending FERC approval on the order, FERC order approving these enhancements. That would go in place on June 3rd. And then following that, the minimum state of charge requirement for the storage resources, we would plan to implement the end of June on June 30th. And then, turning to the summer readiness market enhancements, we're planning to implement that set of enhancements all on June 15th. Again, that includes the EIM coordination and resource sufficiency test review, the import market incentives during tight supply conditions, that make whole payment, the real-time scarcity pricing enhancements. Again, that's pricing the contingency reserves at the bid cap during tight supply conditions. Also implementing the new OASIS report that would show gross exports and imports by intertie, and then including the reliability demand response in the real-time pre-dispatch. And then finally, the load export and wheeling scheduling priorities, we would be implementing that a month later on July 15th. Again, this is all pending FERC approval on those last 2 bullets. And that's all I have. So turn it over to Jessica.
Great, thank you. So yeah, next we have Jessica Tahiri, who's going to provide the summer weather outlook update. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you, Christina. My name is Jessica Tahiri, and like she said, I'll
be the outlook of the 2021 summer forecast for the state of California as well as the rest of the western United States. So the image here is a picture of Lake Folsom I took when I was flying out of California a couple weeks ago here in Folsom, and you can see that even though we're not into summer yet, the lake levels are exceptionally low for this time of year, and that's something I will get into a little bit more detail on the next slide. So taking a quick look at the hydro conditions across the western U.S., we do have drought present across nearly all of the entire western half of the United States, which has led to low reservoirs. So the image on the left shows the severity of the drought across the western U.S. We've got parts of California, Nevada, and the other states of the southwestern United States in exceptional drought, while the rest of the western United States is in some sort of drought condition as well. And with the low levels of rainfall that we received this wintertime, in California we only received on average about 45% of our typical rainfall throughout the state. That puts the reservoirs across California and the rest of the western U.S. being about less than 50% or between 50 and 75% of their normal capacities for this time of year. So that, looking at the lower reservoir capacity as well as the low levels of soil moisture that we've been seeing this year, meaning that the ground is much drier than it should be for this time of year. When we do have the snowpack melt off from the mountains, instead of that water going to feed the reservoirs and kind of keeping their capacity up for the summertime, what that's going to do instead is the snowpack will melt and then kind of go to keep the ground wet, and the ground is going to absorb all that moisture first. So typically we do see some side of reservoir kind of leveling off during the summertime, but instead this year we don't expect the reservoir levels to really go up much during the summer with the snow melt. In addition, we've also, right now in California, we only have about 2% of our normal snowpack. So there's a lot less snow to melt, and then once that snow does melt, instead of feeding the reservoirs, it's going to go to keeping that the ground wet. So all things considered for the hydro conditions this summer, it looks like we are in drought, and there's no indications that that will change this summer. Next slide, please. And then looking at the temperature forecast for the western United States, starting at the top with the June weather outlook. Overall, we do expect the western United States temperature to be above normal. For the coastal areas, that probability is about 20%, so about a 20% chance that the coast across the western United States will see above normal temperatures. And for the interior, it's about 50%, so a little bit higher for the interior. Specifically, the desert southwest is where it looks like the strongest heat will be centered for the month of June. For the entire summer, the months of June, July, August, once again, we do see that there's potential for the overall western United States temperature to be above normal. And the numbers are a little bit different for the months of June, July, August. For the coastal areas in the Pacific Northwest, it looks like there's about a 40% chance for their temperatures to be above normal, while the rest of the interior United States, the western United States, including the desert Southwest, California, Nevada, and that towards the kind of interior Pacific Northwest, there's about a 70% chance for us to be above normal throughout the entire summer. And kind of looking at a few indicators, it looks like maybe the months of later in June and into July and August might be the warmer months and kind of have potential for us to see the highest temperatures going kind of above normal for that time of year. And then finally, technically we define summer as June, July, August, but a lot of stations out in the western United States can see their warmest temperatures actually observed in the September, October timeframe. So taking a look at that as well, it does look like overall for September and October, there's less of a risk for the western U.S. to be as far above normal as compared to the months of June, July, and August. There is risk, however, typically in Southern California, that's when they tend to see their the highest probabilities for fire weather due to kind of offshore flow and increased breezes and hot conditions down throughout Southern California. So it does look like that risk will still be present for Southern California through September and October timeframes, but it's looking like the rest of the western U.S. won't have as large of a potential to be as far above normal as the rest of the summertime. And that is all I have in terms of the weather.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica. Okay, next, Neil Miller is going to talk about the 2021 summer assessment.
Oh, hello. Thank you. It's Neil Miller here. I'll be keeping this very brief. I simply wanted to point out that Robert Emmert, our Senior Manager of Interconnection Resources, gave a more complete presentation on this topic on Monday, and both the presentation as well as the recording of that discussion is available on our website, and it's probably easiest to access directly through the calendar. So I just wanted to give people a heads up that overview of the summer assessment is out there and available, and identify where you could find it. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Neil. That was brief. All right. And finally, we have John Stepps, who's going to provide an update on operations readiness. John?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Christina. If you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, yeah, for these operations readiness, we've had multiple items that are moving, some of them coming from policy, but I'll kind of review how that impacts the operations teams. One of the items we're doing, I'll start in the top left corner there under operational items, is the update to contingency reserve management. We are looking at trying to create criteria that would allow us to dispatch some of our contingency reserves to try to minimize or delay completely on any load shed. And we would be using some firm load to act as our contingency reserves when criteria allows us. As mentioned, some enhancements for the storage management. And so for this year, we're going to create some tools that allow the operators to do this in real time until we can get these enhancements in the market. The load and management policy that was discussed, we have to also help create some tools and awareness for the operators on managing the load and exports or wheels equitably there so that we all share the constraints on the system and shortage of resources. We've already started and are most of the way through validating a lot of our thermal generation fleet to ensure that they are ready for the summer. They can start up and reach their maximum capacity and perform as expected. And let's see, we've been reviewing with the UDCs and metered subsystems their emergency plans to make sure that they align with the California ISO plans and NERC and WEC requirements, just to make sure we're all ready and prepared for the summer. Under the outage management bullet there, there's a planned outage substitution obligation, and this one is basically for the operators on the floor. In the past, when a unit has been on an outage, it's already gone through a review process where we made sure that any unit that had RA capacity would bring substitution RA in place when they're going on an outage. What occurs sometimes, though, is that the unit may begin its work and gets in there and finds there's additional time needed to complete the work and extend their outage. And we did not have a process that then required them to have a replacement RA for that extension period. So now there's a new policy where if they're going to extend an outage, they do have to create a new outage that requires that substitution RA. And if they do not have the substitution RA, it will actually be identified as a forced outage and not a planned outage. And then that has additional review requirements as a forced outage. That should really help us to make sure that we do have a replacement RA for these resources when they do have to perform work. Under the communications piece, as Oscar mentioned earlier, we have clarified our AWE messages. Some of the messages last year, I'll admit, some of them are a little cryptic just on their own. And so we've tried to make them be a little bit more clear about what conditions are, what actions we're taking, as well as we did add the equivalent NERC EEA level so that we can begin that transition to just using the NERC EEA levels next year. We also have reached out to many of our neighboring VAs and some of the water agencies within California and around the West to establish some communications protocols so that we can let them know further in advance of when we're facing a tight period or we forecast a tight day to try to help each other, have them offer us support, but also in return, if they're facing a tough day, that we can offer them support. So it's just to help all of the neighboring VAs in the West and the agencies within California collaborate and work together. We have been working with IOUs on the emergency load reduction plan. It's a pilot program that the CPUC has this year. And so we've been collaborating with the IOUs as they create this ELRP board that will be managing the ELRP pilot. So that board that created the board, so we are working with them on that. And in a sense, this program is going to go up the California ISO day-ahead alerts. When we see that we do not have enough capacity for the next operating day, we declare an alert, and that would actually trigger this ELRP pilot program. On April 21st, we had 2 meetings. In the morning, we had a summer outlook meeting. That's our annual meeting we have every year with our reliability organizations in the West to review last year's peak load day and any changes coming up to this year, fire risks, weather outlooks. And so that went well, good discussions there. And then in the afternoon, we had a summer readiness walkthrough of a scenario of approaching a peak load day to where we would have to shed load. And this, again, was with the neighboring BAs in the West and some of the California agencies on the reliability side to work together and understand the ISO communications, the actions we're taking, and trying to identify where critical communications need to occur so that we can offer each other the support we would all need getting through those days. And based on some of the feedback we got there, we have been updating our communications and procedures. Next slide, please. And this is just kind of a chart that kind of shows how the ISOs, essentially, if you look from the, where it's the alert warning, stage 1, 2, and 3, these are the ones that next year we're going to do away with and move straight and be using the NERC EEA declarations. As you can see, the stage 1, 2, and 3 do not always line up straight across to the NERC EEA declarations, and it has caused a lot of confusion when we're in a stage 2, let's say, but in an EEA 3, what does that really mean? These old stage 1, 2, and 3 emergencies were created back in the early 2000s during the early energy crisis before there were the NERC EEA declarations as a way to communicate to the world of the conditions we are facing. But now that NERC has these new emergency alerts, we are going to move to those so that we're more in line with the rest of the Western Interconnection and really the nation on our emergency alerts. There won't be any change, though. The Flux Alert, the restricted maintenance operation or transmission emergency, we still will have those that are specific to the California ISO BA. I believe that's it for me.
That is. Thank you. And that is topic, our last update for today. So we are going to go ahead and open it up for questions. So if you want to ask your question verbally, you can press pound 2, and we just ask that you start by providing your name and affiliation. Or if you feel more comfortable, you're also welcome to submit chat questions. So send them directly to me and include the name of your organization, and I will share that with the rest of the participants. So just want to note that. We did, while everybody's queuing up, we did receive one chat question from Arturo Avalos from City of Riverside. He was asking, this is related to the RA capacity trend graph on slide 9. What times will that graph be updated? So it's updated twice daily. So Abdul or Amber, can you respond to that question, please?
Yeah, this is Abdul. We're going to update the graph twice, once in the morning before the day-ahead market runs, and then again in the afternoon after the day-ahead market is done running. The morning one should be updated in Outlook by 8:30 a.m. The afternoon one, we're targeting 2 or 3 p.m. to update the Outlook for that.
Thank you, Abdul. Arturo, if you have a follow-up question, you're welcome to send that to the chat. Do we have anybody in the queue, William, at this time?
Yes, you have 2 questions in the queue this time.
Okay, we'll go ahead and go to the phone first.
All right, going to our first caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi. Yes, this is Elaine Ginocchio with the Western Interstate Energy Board. This has to do with slides 12 and 13. So I think this is Greg Cook's section. These are the summer readiness enhancements that were filed with FERC. Their order came back yesterday. I was just curious. I know that order's done. Were there any disputes filed in that process from entities, outside of CAISO?
Greg, you may need to unmute your line.
Yeah, hi, this is Greg Cook. Yeah, we did have a few protests that were filed on that in that filing. I'm trying to remember offhand exactly who they were, and I can't recall right at this point. But I wanted to let you know. But the filing was approved in its entirety, though, in the order that came out yesterday.
Okay. And then the same question, although the order is not out, for load exports and wheeling, has there been protests filed in that proceeding, and by whom?
Yes, there's been several protests filed in that proceeding as well, and those we've had protests from a number of entities, including a host of entities from external balancing authority areas as well as California load serving entities. I think as we knew this was going to be a very contentious filing, there's very different views on this. But again, our answer to those protests, I believe, are due this Friday. We have asked for an extension from FERC. FERC is yet to rule on that. But we'll continue through that process. And again, we're expecting that order to come out at the end of next month.
Okay, thank you so much.
This is Anna. Can I make one clarification? Hi, this is Anna McKenna. I just wanted to make one clarification that we do have an extension out, a request for an extension out with FERC. The request for the extension is with regards to a separate complaint that was filed at FERC. Just want to make sure folks know that. And that was a complaint filed by Nevada on a BPM change that we had put forth. So that's a separate proceeding from the protest that we'll be responding to in June, actually, with response to the initiative that Greg went through. And I just wanted to...
Go ahead.
I'd like to provide you all the docket numbers because I think it'd be easier for folks to look at the docket numbers at FERC. We don't actually get all the protests through our information on our website. Those are then handled through FERC. So it may be easier if you wanted to see exactly who protested to go through the FERC docket itself.
Oh, okay. Were you giving us the docket number now?
Yes, we can provide the docket. I will look it up and provide it if you don't have it, but that's the way to do it.
Okay.
So
and then this is a question for I'm sorry, I forgot the woman's name that did the weather and drought forecast. Did I hear her right that she said that California has 2% of normal snowpack this year?
Hello, yes, this is Jessica. Yes, for right now, for this date in May, we have 2% of normal than what we should have. So that's very, very low snowpack for end of May timeframe.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the answers.
Yes. Okay, William, we have others in the queue?
Going to our next caller. Your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. This is Marcy Palmstrom with Southern California Edison. Thank you for all the good information. I wanted to just ask a quick question on the heat wave bulletin that was mentioned in the first part of the presentation. Can you provide some more insight on what information would actually be included in that bulletin? And then how would that bulletin differ from the earlier collaboration that you were mentioning with LSCs and balancing authorities as part of the Operation Readiness?
Well, as far as the heat wave bulletin, it's a new item that essentially will articulate the conditions, the RA conditions, and the temperatures coming up. It is really intended to signal the public that there could be a possible event. We likely will have to call off this event because forecasts often change 7 days out. However, it's more of an expectations foundational for the consumer to possibly ready themselves to conserve energy when needed. So the heat wave bulletin itself is a news item, a news release item, and that's its intent. As far as operational, I will refer to John. I'm not sure if I understood that question.
Yeah, and I think if she was referring, I think, to our coordination with the neighboring VAs, that would be a different communication that you would make through emails or phone calls. We might even establish a conference call with some of our neighboring VAs as we approach these peak load days.
Okay, and then thank you for that. And as part of that collaboration, is the intent to share, anticipated, load forecast changes, anticipated deficiencies a few days out, or is this more of a real-time communication?
No, yeah, it would be looking several days out what load forecasts are, each of the BA's capacities. If any of the BAs are deficient in supplies, a discussion of which BAs could help to fill that gap, how we can get that energy transferred to the other BAs and schedule them. So it would be looking at all the critical operational challenges we're facing on those days.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions in the queue, William?
You have no other questions in the queue at this time.
Okay, and we do have another chat question, so I will go ahead and send that to all of you. But let me read it off. This is from Andrew Brown with Ellison Schneider, Harrison Dillon. This is a question for Jessica. Are there any forecasts for high overnight temps and monsoonal flows?
All right, so we do keep a close eye on the overnight temperatures. In previous years, we've seen that overnight temperatures can help to drive the average temperature to be above normal, which is one of the things factored into the outlook that I showed on my slide. But right now, kind of looking at overnight temperatures, one of the things we look at when we forecast overnight temperatures is the sea surface temperatures right off the coast, or coastal areas. And right now, in Northern California, they're a bit cooler, so it could help to keep the overnight temperatures for Northern California a little cool. Well, in Southern California, they're actually a little bit on the warmer side, so maybe overnight temperatures there could be a little bit warmer, but that is taken into consideration on the outlooks I showed on my slide for temperature forecasting. And then in terms of the monsoonal impacts, right now, the latest forecast shows potential for maybe slightly below normal precipitation and monsoonal impacts across the southwestern United States. Last year, we actually had our driest monsoon on record, so not sure if next year's monsoon would be just as dry, but right now the latest forecast shows that maybe below normal monsoonal impacts for the southwestern United States.
Thank you, Jessica. So, Andrew, let me know if you have any follow-up questions. William, do we have anybody else in the queue?
No question in the queue this time.
Okay, so I'll just go over this slide, and if anybody wants to queue up, they can. So here are just some links to resources that we have available out on our website. We also added the flexalert.org link here, so if you want to sign up to receive Flex Alerts, here is the website link for your use. And then if you have any questions after this call, you can either submit those through Citi, or also you can submit them on the Contact Us, which is linked on ISO's webpage. If you are a member of the media, please reach out to isomedia@CAISO.com. William, do we have any other questions?
No, ma'am, not at this time.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your participation in these calls, and have a great rest of your day.